You're on 94.1 FM, 3WBC, with Jerry Guirguis presenting...
Downtown, everything's waiting for you. Downtown.
And now here's Jerry Guirguis, 94.1 FM, 3WBC, the voice of the Inner East.
Hang around and let your problems surround you. There are movie shows downtown. Maybe you know some little places to go to where they never close. Downtown, just listen to the rhythm of a gentle bossa nova. You'll be dancing with them too before the night.
Welcome to 94.1 FM 3WBC, Downtown with Jerry Guirguis, interviewing Professor Tiffen, University of Sydney, Faculty of Arts and Sciences. His most recent books is Disposable Leaders. In fact, Rod, you've got more than 8 books at the moment?
Yeah, about a dozen all up, actually. Well, yeah. Anyway, it's decades of labour there, Jerry. Yeah.
I'm sure. And the recent one is Disposable Leaders, Media and Leadership Coups from Menzies right up to Abbott. Hi, Rob, and welcome once again to 94.1 FM.
A pleasure to be with you, Jerry.
Can I start by asking, Mr. Julian Assange, founder of WikiLeaks, Australian editor and journalist and activist, is back home in Australia. What's your take on national security versus press freedom and the right for the public to know?
Well, it's very hard to make absolute lines. I think with Julian Assange, he certainly started out as a sort of absolutist, that nothing should be secret. And he threw stuff onto the internet, some of which was quite sensitive and confidential, although as far as we know, no one was, badly injured by it. But we wouldn't really know all the ins and outs of what happened in Afghanistan or Iraq amongst the informants that he quoted. But I think it's very hard, to draw the lines. On one hand, you can say if it's in the middle of a military operation, nothing should be done to endanger operational security. And I would think on the whole, that's what you would think, unless you thought the operation was completely immoral or something. On the other hand, people can expand national security to encompass almost anything. I always remember when I did a study of the Pentagon Papers that Donald Rumsfeld, working for President Nixon, said there's an implied infallibility of presidents and that publishing the Pentagon Papers destroyed that. Well, that's a very, very, very broad sense of what's national security, that you've got to pretend that your president is infallible. So I think you can draw lines in different ways, but it's always going to be very problematic, I think.
I'm conscious of stories that recently touched on and skirted around that. Of course, Mr. Bernard Collaray, the spy file on secrecy, the whistleblower, ATR whistleblower Richard Boyle, David McBride, who's a lawyer in the Australian Defence Force, sharing highly classified files with journos. And then you've got Witness K, Witness J, and Spy K. Any of them fall into this national security? Definitely Mr. Bernard.
Collaray. Yeah. No, look, I think that Bernard Collaray did everything that was right. The Australian government was doing things which it wasn't admitting to in public, and doing things that undermined the East Timorese government in commercial dealings. So I would think that he is clearly on the right side. The case I think is most is strangest is David McBride.
Mhm.
McBride was a military lawyer, and his original motivation was, in a sense, that there's too much concern with war crimes. We've got to let soldiers be soldiers, sort of thing. And now he's championed as a great peace activist, whereas his original motivation was very different from that. But nevertheless, he served a useful purpose. I mean, the things that were published under his name or that he disclosed showed the really bad side of war in Afghanistan, even if that wasn't his original intention.
Correct. I'm glad that you brought the difference between what his original intentions were and what the media has picked up on it.
Yes, exactly.
I just the other thing that recently sad to hear that Mr. Paul Barry has announced he'll be finishing with the ABC Media Watch somewhere December 24. His TV, of course, his Media Watch TV program. After 11 lovely years, my question, will the next presenter be made to drive the ratings down, giving authorities good reasons to cancel the program altogether?
No, I would doubt it. I mean, I think Paul Barry built up a unique following, and it will be hard for anyone to replace him. I think that he was a very well-known and esteemed journalist before he started, and he's brought those gifts for investigation and cross-checking and whatever to his role in Media Watch. And so personally, I mean, I know him a little bit. We both wrote books about Rupert Murdoch, and I'm sad to see him go. I've got no idea what his successor will be like, or who it'll be, or will they do as good a job? I don't think the ABC would want to drive down its ratings, although he has embarrassed the ABC several times over the years. Yeah.
I'm sort of alluding to getting rid of the only checker of their own state-owned media networks, and I'm concerned about that phrase, in that the checker is gone, the checker of the auditor is gone, or gone anyway.
Yeah.
Today's political leaders, if I can move on to the next one, I know I'm limited, and I'm really grateful for your time. Today's political leaders remind me of the Thucydides trap, meaning we need to keep up with the Joneses, taking us to the old Cold War entrapment. Today around the world, and been watching the BBC, listening to the BBC, and all around the world, authoritarian dictators are seen as the new acceptable democratic leaders. The country is now forced to shift to the extreme side of politics in order to be in equilibrium of the singular polarization view in power. The question I have for you, what plans should be drafted now in Australia to face these authoritarian, so-called friendly dictators, right-wing world leaders?
Well, you never ask small questions, do you, Jerry? I think there's a range of authoritarian leaders. On the one hand, traditional adversaries such as Russia and China have both become more authoritarian in the last decade, and a bit more, certainly assertive. In Russia's case, aggressive. In China's case, I think still assertive. But then there's a range of other dictators who were, let's say Hungary would be the primary example, because people thought it was being a democracy. It was admitted to the European Union on the grounds that it was a democracy. And yet it's now slid right back, and it's pushing a very right-wing conservative line, a line that appeals to lots of people in the West, conservatives in the West. I mean, people like Tony Abbott are over there saying what a great bloke Orban is, and so forth. And there is a fear, I guess, or I say a fear, showing my own values, that in countries like France and Germany, who've been great stalwarts of democracy over the last, since World War II, and the Front National in France and the AfD in Germany are sort of gaining much more power than we would have ever expected a decade ago. So even within Western democracies, there are worrying authoritarian tendencies, or worrying. There's a worryingly big constituency that is attracted to such views, and we can just only take it a step at a time. Of course, I think in terms of consequences, the biggest one would be Trump becoming president again in America, because America plays such a unique role in the world and has such an influence on Australian politics. And I think if he became president in America, Western democracies.
Sorry, Rod, I just lost you in the last 3 minutes.
Oh,
Sorry, just in relations to Mr. Trump winning.
yes. If he won again, I think it would be a big threat to American democracy, because he's said things like he's going to take retribution, and he's got no respect for democratic institutions when they don't go his way. And I think because of America's unique influence in the world, this will have a knock-on effect in countries like Australia and other Western democracies.
And my question was, what should we be doing? Drafting. You did mention we should be stepping back and looking at it step by step. But again, country after country is moving to the extreme. We're not with, Britain on centre at the moment with the Labor Astra winning. But if we're going to have Mr. Trump who come in, we're going to have India doing north and south and so same thing all around the world. For them to move to the extreme, you can't be in the centre. You have to be in the extreme to bring out an equilibrium to the powers. It's going back to what I was trying to say, the Thucydides trap, if I can pronounce it properly.
Yeah. Look, I'm not sure what Australia can do. I mean, we in Australia need to work always at strengthening our own democratic institutions. We can't really affect what happens in America. We can be vigilant. We've embraced, Prime Minister Albanese embraced Prime Minister Modi in a way that you would have thought he might be a bit more cautious. That's partly because they want India as a bulwark against China. But, Modi is one of these tendencies to much more authoritarian rule. So it's just very tricky, I think. That's a pretty pathetic answer, I guess. But we've got to keep working on strengthening our own institutions, which means strengthening parliamentary processes, strengthening the quality of democratic debate, strengthening legal accountability, strengthening checks and balances. And this is, as I think it was Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Unfortunately, it might be eternal, but it's become more urgent more recently. Yeah.
Absolutely. Rod, I'll have to, again, thank you for allocating the time. There's lots more to talk about within our Australian government at the moment in relations to recent events. But let's just say tonight, again, thank you again for allocating the time, and I really look forward to speaking to you in the near future.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Jerry. All the best. Cheers.